Sir Charles Mayfield has been appointed as lead for the government's Keep Britain Working review. The open-source material we're providing links to prove that he is entirely unsuitable. In brief, Mayfield has a career history of putting himself very much first. A government reviewer should have no bias. He was marketing manager at GSK for Lucozade and would have known at the time of the adverse health effects potential of the product. Probably many of his customers are now in poorer condition. At John Lewis, he showed scant regard for his staff's financial situation. During COVID, he misdirected the country to purchase from his high-priced website while having a bargain basement site selling the exact same products. The Sunday Times reported on this. The appointment was announced by the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions Liz Kendall. Mayfield is good at selling himself, and maybe she'd not fully reviewed his history. The primary objection is that he was marketing manager for Lucozade at its transition from a low-sales recovery tonic to a hyped sports recovery drink in the early 1990s. Similar to the more recent hype with Prime, it was designed to appeal and arguably hook a less educated and vulnerable audience. Extremely high sugar, caffeinated, brightly colored drinks naturally appealed to the children and younger adults in the 1990s. 30 years later, the original consumers may well be in poorer health as a result. These people, again as a probability, are now more likely to be in the long-term disabled demographic. Sadly, this is just common sense. As such, the marketing manager of Lucozade in the 1990s is the very last person who should be reviewing the lives of the very people he marketed to. From the sources found, Lucozade had an incredibly high sugar content in the period that Mayfield was involved. 62 grams of sugar is double the recommended daily adult intake per day and 3 times that of a child. During its development, the sucrose quantity in Lucozade was known to be excessive and that this enhanced the chances of diabetes. Further to that, it was believed that certain cancers and type 2 diabetes were more likely for people with obesity. It was also known that acne was exacerbated by high sucrose. Remember that GSK are a pharmaceutical company and during the 1990s, developed what was to become Avandia. After tens of thousands of cardiac arrests attributed to the drug in the USA, GSK made an out-of-court settlement for USA victims of $3 billion. Victims in the UK, who survived but may still be affected and possibly unable to work, have received nothing to date. Cynically, you could argue that Lucozade was furnishing them with a later set of diabetics to market to. Caffeine dependence is an established fact, and the behavioral aspects were known in the 1990s also. In any event, the drink was clearly designed to hook its naive consumers, and Mayfield must have known this from the drink's formulation and product research. In 2016, Liverpool Council began a campaign against Lucozade, calling it the worst offender for children's dental and physical health. This, along with the 2017 sugar tax, will all be in Mayfield's knowledge. In fact, the 2017 sugar tax was imposed by his fellow British Museum trustee, Sir George Osborne. So, Mayfield cannot reasonably claim that his actions at GSK still allowed him to be in a state of ignorance of the adverse effects of Lucozade at the time of his appointment in 2024. We've found nothing where he states that he'd acted naively and that he now wishes to help those who will have been disadvantaged. The Nolan Principles are there for good reason, and an individual's overall history in the public eye should be considered for any appointment. At John Lewis, Mayfield clearly didn't practice the employee-owned business model that he preached, as he managed to benefit tremendously compared to the mainly female employees at the time. COVID has been described as the most difficult time in modern British history since World War II. Mayfield's actions during COVID are completely galling. Something similar to dressing as a woman to climb on board one of the Titanic's lifeboats. He negotiated with the government to allow people to attend training at home while on furlough. Okay so far. However, he used the opportunity to personally profit and to support QA Group, the training provider that he is still chairman for. This may have been understandable, but QA had a pretend third-party website which undersold their pricing by up to 65%. Mayfield used an article in the Sunday Times to direct the NHS, MOD, local and national government and FTSE etc. businesses to the high-priced QA site, keeping their profits up when everyone's attention was primarily on the epidemic. He even used the words "must grab" for this, which describes the man entirely. However, in order to mop up the business from struggling UK companies who saw training their employees during the epidemic as a necessity, QA Group had their additional pretend site running. The Sunday Times got wind of this and challenged him. While it wasn't technically illegal, according to the CMA, it was described as eyebrow-raising. The Sunday Times analysis showed that this was done at scale despite QA's comments that it was just a very minor service and was to help people out. The people it was actually helping out, aside from Mayfield himself, were CVC, QA's owners. Particularly, it helped keep their two $50 million yachts in full party-going order. While most of the UK was confined and banging pots and pans on their doorsteps on Thursday evenings, Mayfield's employers were much more comfortable, and at least in part, this was at the expense of the NHS. While focus on training, the bargain basement website has been closed down, QA have new mechanisms in place. In a follow-up video we'll show you, with receipts, those mechanisms, and also how CVC utilize QA to draw down vast sums of money via Crown Commercial Services to fund their lavish lifestyles, irrespective of the quality of their product. We'd strongly suggest that any public bodies purchasing QA's skills license review their agreement. The default one with QA does not guarantee you'll receive anything, and your payment is non-refundable and is a candidate for an instant bonus to CVC. Ask Charles Mayfield about this, as he describes himself as an advisor to CVC. Interestingly, after the Sunday Times article, Mayfield disappeared from being listed as chairman on QA's website for a couple of years. He's now listed again. The Nolan Principles were developed in part to help steer those in public office in ways that would help re-cement trust in public life. Mayfield's behaviour over his career doesn't sit well with these, and it's clear that Liz Kendall sadly didn't do her homework. Our aim isn't political at all. It's simply to point out that someone lacking a moral compass shouldn't be placed in a position to review and affect the lives of the people he has shown no regard for. This needs to be made good. Abuse of position and power has consequences. The Avandia scandal very clearly points this out. Mayfield, in his role at QA, has encouraged funds to be drawn from the NHS, MOD, local government, the civil service and many FTSE-listed and smaller organisations and private individuals. The primary purpose of this funding has been for profit for CVC, with the quality and pricing of QA's training services product being secondary at best. The UK's quality training providers, typically small to medium-sized enterprises with a focused portfolio, quality far surpassing that of QA and with much lower pricing, have also been adversely affected by QA's market dominance and profiteering. QA have massive debts and require a £385 million credit facility which is mainly funded by upfront, non-refundable payments for mainly non-scheduled and non-guaranteed training services. Crown Commercial Services, the government's procurement service, enables this and takes a fee, called the levy, for each transaction. This fee funds Crown Commercial Services and is poorly used. For example, the head of Crown Commercial Services' base salary is substantially higher than that of the British Prime Minister, and yet there's public proof of incredibly poor service, the 68% failure rate for just one of the apprenticeship schemes not actually being the worst. The National Audit Office has stated that Crown Commercial Services levy needs should be reduced by 50% and that they could easily make savings of £500 million. Our MP was horrified when we demonstrated the mechanisms that allow profits to flow to QA. Again, we cover this in a separate video. While this is in part a separate issue, it's still one to be dealt with, and it's a further indication of the unsuitability of Charles Mayfield. The appointment of Mayfield is one for the Minister for the Department of Work and Pensions to immediately attend to. We've tried multiple times to put this information before the Minister, but neither Liz Kendall's ministerial email address nor her successor's Pat McFadden's ministerial email address has resulted in a reply. We've emailed both constituencies also, but again, there has been no response. The first email was sent to Liz Kendall on the 29th of August and the first to Pat McFadden on the 10th of September. It would appear that they have no concern about who they appoint.